Good evening, and welcome to 7 Stories Up, Jack Norton with Ruth Wilson Gilmore. The jail is everywhere. We are delighted to have you all joining us tonight at the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. My name is Ashley Dow, and I am the supervising librarian at the Andrew Heiskell Braille and Talking Book Library. Before we begin, I would like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for making programs like this evening's conversation possible. I would like to encourage you to visit New York Public Library's website and take a look at upcoming programs like this one. We have an excellent lineup for you this season, featuring new nonfiction, music, and more. We would love for you to join us in this space again. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. Jack Norton is a writer, researcher, and photographer who studies incarceration and development. He is an assistant professor at Governor State University in the Chicago Southland and is co-editor of The Jail is Everywhere, Fighting the New Geography of Mass Incarceration. Ruth Wilson Gilmore is professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences and director of the Center for Place, Culture, and Politics at the City University of New York Graduate Center, a co-founder of many grassroots organizations, including California Prison Moratorium Project, Critical Resistance, and the Central California Environmental Justice Network. Gilmore works on racial capitalism, organized violence, organized abandonment, and abolition as a green, red, and internationalist project of liberation. Author of Abolition Geography, Essays Towards Liberation, and the prize-winning Golden Gulag, Prisons, Surplus, Crisis, and Opposition in Globalizing California, she recently published a new introduction to Lenin's imperialism and the national question. With Paul Gilroy, she co-edited Stuart Hall, Selected Writings on Race and Difference. Change Everything, Racial Capitalism and the Case for Abolition is forthcoming from Haymarket. Gilmore has lectured in Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. Her internationalist work is featured in the Antipode Foundation documentary, Geographies of Racial Capitalism with Ruth Wilson Gilmore. Honors include the Ralph Santiago Abascal Prize in Economic and Environmental Justice, the Southern California Library Lifetime Achievement Award, a New Way of Life Reentry Project Lifetime Achievement Award, the American Studies Association Angela Y. Davis Award for Public Scholarship, the Association of American Geographers Harold Rose Award for Anti-Racist Research and Practice, the SUNY Purchase College Eugene V. Grant Distinguished Scholar Prize for Social and Environmental Justice, the Lannan Foundation Lifetime Cultural Freedom Award, and the Marguerite Casey Foundation 2022 Freedom Scholar. She is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our participants.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I can see. Hi, Ruthie.
Hi, Jack.
How are you?
I'm pretty well. How are you?
I'm great. There are a lot of people that we know here. So
Thanks for coming out, everybody. It's a little strange to be talking to you from display screens on the walls, but we will figure this out, won't we? So should I get us started? I have lots of questions to ask you, Jack.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna look at you like I'm talking to you about the book.
Okay.
So,
All right. All
yeah.
right. So first of all, thank you everybody at the library for hosting this event. I am a firm believer in the central importance of public libraries to everything we hold dear. So thank you, NYPL, for having us tonight. It's very late where I am, so I'm going to stick with my script so I don't get lost. I had the pleasure of writing a brief foreword to this book, a little bit of a preface. And while I was reading the book and trying to figure out what to say about it, I realized how profoundly that you, Jack, and your co-editors, Lydia Pillow-Hobbs and Judith Shept, and all of the people who have written for this book have taken a problem that had become, for many people, not part of the visual or political landscape, and made it as present and as violent and as necessary of our political organizing as it is. You really show how this monster has grown and proliferated across the United States. So I wonder if we could start out by you telling us a little bit about how you and Lydia and Judah came to make this book and why you decided to hold up this particular kind of institution, the jail, as a central object of our study.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for writing the introduction to the book. It's worth getting the book for the introduction. I read it today. It really is. So Judah, Lydia, and I. Judah is a professor at Eastern Kentucky University. He's at a middle school orientation tonight, and he couldn't be here. And I'm not sure where Lydia is. Lydia's always somewhere, and she's a professor at the University of Kentucky. So, and I'm a professor at Governor State. Lydia, yeah, I don't need to give everybody's biography, but it's like we all have come at this problem in different ways and in different places. I feel like Judah Shept wrote this book called Progressive Punishment about a jail expansion fight in, I don't know what the county is, but it's in Bloomington, Indiana. And for me, that's like one of the first works. He's one of the first people that really saw this problem, and he saw it through organizing against it, at least in my circles. I'm going to talk about myself, I guess, because I'm here. So I studied with Ruth Gilmore at the CUNY Graduate Center. I have a PhD in geography from CUNY. And so I am trained by Ruthie, and if you know Ruthie and you know her work, that means I'm trained to sort of think like a geographer, look at the political economy of incarceration, to step back and to see trends in incarceration as bigger than just a technical problem about policing or incarceration. So I don't want to make this too long, but like, from where I am, I interned at the Vera Institute of Justice back in the summer of 2016. And when I was there, Jacob Kang Brown, who's back there, and others had put together this data set, this county level data set of jail incarceration. So this is an opportunity for me to like quickly explain what a jail is. So a jail is usually like it's where people are incarcerated for usually sentences of a year or less, depending on what state you're in, or they're detained pre-trial, or sometimes for the whatever. We can get into how jails are used later, but jails are a county level, sometimes city level, in the case of New York City and a couple other places, but usually are run by a county sheriff's office or a county level carceral facility. Now in the US, there are over 3,000 counties. Most of these have a county jail. So county jails in the US sort of make up this diffuse carceral infrastructure in the US. And they're easily overlooked because they are everywhere in the US. So Jacob had put together this data set from like 1970 to whatever year we were, like maybe it went to 2013 at that point, of just the incarceration rates and like who would, like sort of the basic trends of incarceration county by county in the United States. Sounds easier to assemble than it was, I'm sure. And when I came in for my internship, they had found that basically incarceration rates had been rising in rural counties and suburban counties in the United States. I forget what it was, like the last 20 years. And at the time, it seemed really, it's just not the geography that I was used to thinking about. Because I grew up in a prison county in upstate New York. And I guess the common sense was like everybody going to prison, everybody getting arrested was coming from neighborhoods of color, a few of them in New York City, basically. And to see the trends of like, oh, it's like incarceration is rising significantly all across the country. And the geography is that big city incarceration rates are falling, and rural and suburban incarceration rates are rising. So bear with me. I know this is a long story. I'm just trying to like give you the wonky background of the book. So I came in as an intern and was like looking at this, and I'm friends with Jacob, and we talk about this a lot, and we were figuring this out. And anyway, and I ended up working at the Vera Institute for 5 years, pretty much. And my job was to try to figure out what was going on in some of these places. And so that's part of like where it comes from a little bit. But in the course of that work, I talked to a lot of people organizing against jails in different parts of the country. And I had really the honor and the privilege and the sort of amazing intellectual experience of hearing different people's analyses that they had come to in the course of fights in different parts of the country. And it was amazing. And Judah had that experience in different places than I did, and Lydia too. So that's kind of how we got to the book. Like, the book is trying to both like name the problem, and it's trying to give some of that wonky detail to explain to people like, oh, this is a real front in like the expansion of like whatever we're calling it, mass incarceration in the US. This is part of the geography of like class war in the United States. And it's also to sort of lift up some of these analyses. You know, they're organizers who wrote the chapters, and they're intellectuals, and they're people that have really developed analyses that are grounded in different counties in cities where they're from. So I'll leave it at that.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for laying this out. And I hope everybody in the audience is patient with the wonky side and understands that the wonky side arises from the political side and the activist side, as well as the other way around. It all develops together at once. Another way of putting what I just said is that, Jack, you and Lydia and Judah, and all of the people who've written for the book, ask really great questions to get beneath the surface of what's going on so that we can see the multiple situations in which this jail growth has happened, and as importantly, to see all the different ways that people can do an analysis that enables them to fight better. So I wonder if you would share with us maybe one of the stories. You've got an interview that you did in Nashville that's really, I think it's Nashville, that's really powerful. Just talk about the getting beneath the surface of what people see to understand the kind of analysis that you just said you had the honor and privilege of learning about firsthand.
Okay, thank you. That's a good one. Yeah, I interview. So in the book, this is one of my favorite parts of the book too. There's an interview with Dawn Harrington and Jacola Lane of Free Hearts, Tennessee. So Free Hearts is an organization of formerly incarcerated women based in Nashville, in Tennessee. And I met Dawn and Jacola and a bunch of other people from Free Hearts through my work at Vera. It was like a retreat or something. I remember I was presenting work that I had done on upstate New York about kind of close to where I was from, and it was like Q&A, and I said something about like, oh, I'm doing like political economy analysis of rural places. And I think it was Dawn was like, what do you mean by political economy analysis? And I was like, explained, I'm looking at like the history of the place and the economic base and how it relates to incarceration. And she was like, oh, we're doing that too, actually. And like, so we started that discussion, and that ended up being, I worked with Free Hearts, Stephen Jones, who's here, Jess Zhang, who's in the audience. Sorry, I can see them. But we all worked with Free Hearts to develop this report called The Criminalization of Poverty in Tennessee. So this is the background to the interview. So I knew Dawn and Jacola, and so, and it was really cool. I'm gonna give a little bit more example, because I don't even know if it's in the interview, but like the criminalization of poverty in Tennessee is not a frame, the criminalization of poverty framework is not what I brought to the table, it's what they brought. And what's interesting is how they got there. So they had developed this survey as an organizing tool. These are Black women, at that point, I think they're Black women organizers based in Nashville. And they were just trying to figure out what is going on in Tennessee. Now, they know they want to organize people. They know they are against incarceration, just given what they've experienced. So they developed this survey. It was very open. It's just like, just asking people like what their experiences were like with incarceration, with poverty, with different sort of social problems. And it was like a form, I think. There was an email version. Anyway, they drove all around the state. And anytime they'd run into anybody, anytime they would ask them these questions. They would give them these surveys. Anytime there was some sort of festival or any opportunity to set up tables, they'd have 2 people set up and ask people these questions. So when we started working with them, they were like, oh, well, we have all of this data and we don't know what to do with it. So we developed, so anyway, that's where we came in and worked on the criminalization of poverty. So the interview is really interesting because they are describing coming to an analysis of the criminalization of poverty. It is not what they meant to get to. It is what they got to from driving around different parts of Tennessee. And I think it's one of the more interesting parts is when they're talking about driving into Tennessee is really long. It goes from east west. So it's you got West Tennessee, which is I was going to say but it's literally Mississippi Delta. You've got Memphis, Black Belt counties. You have Central Tennessee, which I don't really understand Nashville, but they live there, and I've been through there. And then you've got Appalachia, mountains, big ones, mostly white counties, right up against Kentucky, things you think about with Appalachia. And they were talking about oh, well, we have relatives in Memphis, and that was interesting talking to them. And then we were driving into Sullivan County, which is Appalachian County. And they're sort of describing the organizing challenges going into these all-white counties. And they're describing sort of what that was like, what they found out, and also what they needed to do as organizers, how their encounters with people there changed how they approached the problem, and how they ended up recruiting different people from some of those communities who could organize there with them. So it's a bit of a ramble, but it's a good interview in that it shows how people reach an analysis, and it shows their methods, and I love it. And I'm sorry to brag about it because I was the interviewer and I know these people, but I love it. And of course I love them because it's rare that, as if you're me, you run into somebody and it's what do you do with your time? And they're we drive around rural parts of the country tracking people down in the grocery store being have you ever been to jail? And it's oh, that's what I do. And it's wow, let's write something because that's what you do to make friends if you're, So yeah, that's it. It's I forget what your original question was, but it's a great chapter because it's people describing how they reached historical geographical analysis, and what it means.
That's a really great answer. And by the way, everybody, it is a great chapter. And for that chapter alone, you all should buy the book at the end of our session and have Jack sign it for you. And you put me in mind of an experience that I had along with my life and frequently writing and organizing partner, Craig Gilmore, many years ago, when we were constantly trying to figure out the various ways that people in rural California might be hailed to the struggle to stop the expansion of prisons in those communities. And one of the groups who we just happened onto was this little tiny environmental justice organization from this little tiny town in the Central Valley called Grayson. And the organization was basically a couple and one of their mothers. So it was like 3 people from one extended household who had been doing door-to-door surveys to find out what people's experience was as a result of a tire fire that had been burning outside their town for years. So it was a grassroots environmental justice effort to figure out, which is to say, to make a record of the negative effects that this tire fire was having on individuals and households and communities. And exactly the way you laid it out, Jack, people were doing this incredibly radical work that had all of the elements of terrific political economic geography. And like the people who you became colleagues with there in Nashville, they didn't use the same words, but this is what they were doing. And together, we just developed languages that we could use collectively to fight against environmental harm, environmental racism, and prison expansion. So I like the resonance between the story that you told and some of the experiences that I've had and have written about over the years. And one of the things that pulls together what's happening there in Tennessee and in many of the places, well, throughout the book, the jail is everywhere, and what we were, and people still are, struggling over in the context of California and elsewhere, is the problem of organized abandonment and how organized abandonment runs up against and eventually becomes dominated by the forces of organized violence. And those forces include police, sheriff, military, prisons, jails, border patrol, and also organized, certain kinds of organized gangs as well. But the forces of organized violence show up and grow in the context of abandonment. And this is another way of talking about the criminalization of poverty. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about, and maybe use other examples from your book here, talk some more about how the database that Jacob Kang Brown and others were working on showed a change in the carceral geography of rural and suburban United States that we can understand as part of how organized violence swept up the people who have run out of options in the context of organized abandonment.
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm gonna use examples. Like I'm trying to. It's first of all, like I feel like, and after doing that work for so many years, it's like, and then living in New York City while I was doing it. So like living in Bushwick or Bed-Stuy, which I moved to in like 2009 when those were different neighborhoods, right? And I'm like setting myself up for a long story, but it's like I was studying the shifting geography of like the class war in the United States, which is what you're talking about. And it was very visceral. So when you're talking about like declining incarceration rates in big cities, it's hard not to see that. And that's for a lot of reasons, and I'm not the final word on why that happened. But in my head, some of that is because the cops and the real estate interests and the insurance companies pushed people out of the neighborhoods. So there's that. They pushed people out. They ethnically cleansed neighborhoods. And it's different in other parts of the country, right? That's not going on in Montgomery County, New York, which had the highest incarceration rate in the state for a long time. It's like a county or two over from where I grew up. And it is, organized abandonment. I know you're not talking about just aesthetics, but if you drive in there, it's just abandoned textile factories, right? And they made rugs, carpets. Before wall-to-wall carpeting, they had multi-tiered brick factory buildings. And as those jobs were shifting south in the United States, before they left the country, those companies hired Puerto Rican workers, basically, as a strategy to pay them less. And it's just like you're in the weeds, right? And it's but we always have to kind of be in the weeds a little bit historically to figure this out. So that's Montgomery County. They did that, so those jobs are gone. You go to Montgomery County, it is impressive in terms of looking like an abandoned city, but people still live there. It's a small city, and people are still moving there. Excuse me. Whether they're moving there from the South Bronx, because it's nice there, it's pretty, it's upstate New York, or they might be moving there directly from Puerto Rico, or they might be moving there some people are moving there from Costa Rica, or wherever they're moving from. People are still moving to Montgomery County. And you have a local elite that is, elite sounds like they're wealthy, but they're not. They control local government, and they are the police, and they are the judges and all that. So it's that had the highest incarceration rate. You're talking about, sorry, I'm lost thinking about Montgomery County here, but I just have so many stories of places like this, and I see it as a different, as the class war happening, and it's a great question, and I'm looking at the time I have left. It's and the higher incarceration rates, it's you have different stories everywhere, and it is important to tell those stories, right? It's Glades County is another place I went to in my work, had an incredibly high incarceration rate. They basically built their county jail as an ICE detention facility, and it's the place where the Seminole. So I'm in the weeds, but it's unless you get in the weeds, you find yourself at a gas station in Montgomery County, not knowing where you are, who you are, how you got there, what is going on. But in terms of people getting swept up, it's part of it is about mobility. Part of it is about pushing labor costs down, for sure. That is happening. So one place I went to was Southwest Georgia. So it's Albany, Georgia, Americus, Georgia. If you don't know where Albany, Georgia is, it's south of Atlanta. Du Bois wrote a chapter on it in The Souls of Black Folks. It has an incredibly high incarceration rate. When I was there, it was one out of every, I forget. It was something crazy. One out of every 100 people was in the jail in the town at any given day. And when I talked to local politicians, ex-politicians, and was why is this? The answer I got was, it is a way of controlling and cheapening labor, basically. Mm-hmm. It is a way to pay people very little money to work in chicken plants so that people can eat chicken nuggets cheaply, basically. And that is the function of the jail. So I don't know if I'm getting at your original question, but I think I'm kind of getting lost here, but it's the geography of the rural and suburban areas has to do with partly it's about how the federal government is using rural and suburban areas to massify their capacity at the county level, and I think part of it is the shifts in sort of class war in the U.S. And how labor is being controlled in different parts of the country, and big urban areas having different development strategies right now than rural areas. I'm gonna stop on this ramble. Yeah.
let me pick up from where you left off. And as you know, I completely agree with you that mass incarceration is class war. And there are, various dimensions to how this war plays out in different regions, in different jurisdictions, but in the aggregate, that's what it is. And therefore, at the local level, that war must be fought the way all wars must be fought, in terms of what the local struggle looks like, and then how that struggle can be in solidarity with struggles that stretch across time and sometimes sector. So, something that I thought about as you were talking about upstate New York, or talking about Southwest Georgia, or we could talk about South Dakota, is the fact that in so many rural parts of the United States, there is no inpatient health care left, like none. There's only a little bit of urgent care, and then otherwise people have to travel very long distances for healthcare. That also is class war. Class war is not only between employers and employees. Similarly, the destruction of public education, the privatization of many public services and public goods, and the closure of things like public libraries are also part of class war. So a couple of things that came to mind that maybe we could talk about for the little bit of time we have left is how some of these jails, which seem at the outset to people who haven't had a chance to get in the weeds, their weeds with you, to be local lockups for local police to lock up locally criminalized people, how those become part of, as you said earlier, the federal infrastructure of both immigrant detention and federal prison, as well as part of the extended infrastructure of state prison systems and so forth. So maybe you could tell the story about Glades County as an example.
Sure. Yeah, so thank you. So the federal agencies, by which I mean the U.S. Marshals and ICE, use county jails to detain people, to lock people up for immigrant detention. And when they do that, they'll have an agreement with a county jail, and they will pay that county jail, that sheriff's office, what's called a per diem. So it's a certain amount of money for every person, say, held for ICE in the county jail. So just that right off the bat. That's important to understand, I'm going to just say, the sort of capacity that ICE has to lock up thousands of people across the country, all like everywhere. The other part of that I think is important is that because of those per diems, counties are incentivized, and it makes sense for them actually to build massive jails, right? Because if you're going to go into debt, public debt as a county, and you're going to be paying off this debt in 30 years, you're like, well, what's the difference? We can build like a 100-bed jail, or we can build a 300 or 400-bed jail, and then we can get this revenue from ICE, and that'll help us pay off the debt or whatever. So yes, but ICE is the federal government, all these counties are down here. ICE can sort of deal with all of these counties individual, and what happens in aggregate is a massive, like a carceral arms race between counties to build bigger and bigger jails. And the thing about jails is when they build it, they fill it, and so if there's more capacity, there's more people from whatever getting locked up. The thing about Glades County, when Jacob and I were looking at that data set, this is not in the book, but when we were looking at that data set, Glades County was some incredibly high incarceration rate. And so I went down there. Glades County is like on Lake Okeechobee. There's a Seminole reservation there. It's where Andrew Jackson fought the Seminoles for 30 years, whatever. These are weeds, but it's important to know where you are. And I went down to Glades County. It turns out Glades built a massive jail that's really an immigrant detention center. And they built it on spec. And what they did is they formed a nonprofit that had the same, like the board of directors for the nonprofit was basically the county commission. And they routed the debt through that nonprofit so that they thought the county wouldn't be liable for it. But it's like, yeah, whatever. So they did this like whole shell game thing. And they built this, I forget how many beds the jail is, but it's an immigrant detention center run by Glades County. And if you look on the cover of the book, it's actually a detail of a photo that I took of that detention center, that barbed wire. So they built this thing. Thanks, Ruth. And this is like, I was down there years ago, and this place blew my mind because like in the meantime, they're like burning sugar cane. There's like columns of smoke coming up. And I was on the phone to Jacob, like, what's up with this place? And he's Googling things. We're trying to figure it out. But it's like they built this major detention center, and then there weren't enough ICE detainees, immigrant detainees, for ICE to pay them enough money to pay the debt. Does that make sense? So all of a sudden, all the county commissioners were like Glades as a county was just concerned about enough, like we need to lock up more immigrants, basically. And I think Glades is important to understand how jail expansion, it's a physical infrastructure, but it sort of like structures the political relationships of a place. It structures like local relationships to the federal government, and it restructures the political priorities of a county, and it's happening all over this place. So like in Glades, I talked to this guy. He was on the county commission. He ran a gas station. He had a little office in the back. You know, it was like a gas station with like fried chicken, like on plates and stuff. And I went and I interviewed him, and he told me, and he just like knew all of these details about like how many immigrant detainees were. And these are people like that they're locking up from all over the country, right? It's not like they're picking people up in Glades. Like, but they all of a sudden in Glades are super focused on ICE bringing enough people in there and them getting enough money to pay. So they're like, you know, they're pro-Trump immigration policies. They're following everything, right? Because they really need to pay off their debt, basically. And this guy in the office is talking about the bondholders and what the bondholders want and this and that, and we need more ICE detainees, blah, blah, blah. So like, I guess the other part of that story is I read the local newspaper, like the archives in this place, and he came up years earlier before they built this. And what I realized is like, what that guy was doing, that like county commissioner was doing with his free time before they built that thing, before he was worrying about ICE locking people up, deporting people, ruining people's lives, he was just like teaching 4-H. And I don't know, I've used that example a lot, but it really made an impression on me because it was like, you know, I traveled around, I met people in person. It's like, it would be easy if they were just like villains, but I'm like, oh, this man has skills. He knows how to take care of horses. He was teaching children how to do so. And because of this expansion, like all of his energy and his capacity and his skills, such as they are to like administer and like work for the county, are being directed in the service of like criminalization and deportation. Does that make sense? So it's like, you know, and it's one little thing. It's like he's not the most important person in the story, but it does change daily life in rural areas.
Well, you know, one of the things that we're always trying to remind ourselves, and when I say we, I mean all of us who do this kind of research and this kind of organizing, is to remember that the structures we talk about are the sort of aggregate dynamic results of what individuals do. And when I say individual, I'm not talking in a liberal sense of, you know, individual free will people making a bunch of bad choices, but rather that institutions and structures are the sedimented result of the combined efforts of individuals like that guy, who, if he was still doing 4-H, or principally or primarily doing 4-H, would be laying out a future very different from the future he's fighting to interrupt when it comes to the immigrants he needs to lock up so that their future ability in Glades County to pay down its debt will be guaranteed. Which is to say, we've got a shift in how people who have aggrandized the forces of organized violence through the carceral into political power are turning the interrupted futures of people who are caught up into money to pay for other futures. And it's really monetizing time that we're seeing over and over again throughout the country. So I wonder, how much time do we have, host?
Oh, I can see it on the screen. We have a couple of minutes before Q&A.
Okay, all right. So we've talked a little bit about the fact that ICE and the marshals are encouraging and using this space. Silky Shah has a piece in the book and has also written a terrific book called Unbuilt Walls. And we also can get some sense from the discussion we've been having about how this move toward a thicker on-the-ground system of carceral institutions not only has launched a new and profound round of class war in the United States, but also it has certain international characteristics, not only because there are long-distance migrants who cross borders who get caught up in the system, but also because the US, not alone, exports to other places in the world this system of social control to be used to pacify the people whose organized abandonment leaves them with fewer and fewer options. So could you say a little about that before we wrap up?
I think so. I think the really though? Really though? Okay. Which part? The Christian, help me. Yeah, I the exportation of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure the internationalization of this, or the what can I say about this? If we stay on the immigrant detention part of it, yeah, I can think about this. Like Silky Shah has a chapter in this book, which is, I think, very important part of the book. It lays out what I just discussed with ICE and the U.S. Marshals, and Silky has a book with Haymarket that everybody should read. But yeah, and I'll be quick because we got to go to Q&A, but like a lot of the work in this book and a lot of the work I did looking at jails is like, I felt like I was mapping the post-financial crisis in the United States. I also felt like we were looking at like the world after NAFTA in some of these places, basically. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but like Alamance County, like sticking with the textile industry from Montgomery County, and then I've been to like North Carolina where they used to make all of our jeans and our denim, and they don't make that anymore, and they shipped those jobs. I don't know where those jobs are now. I don't know who's making denim, but for a while they were on the Mexican border, in the north of Mexico, with NAFTA. Anyway, like post-NAFTA, so many people came up from Mexico into North Carolina. Like the population of some of these counties went from like 1% Latinx, or however they're measuring it, to like 12 or 13%. Um, and you see the rise of these sort of fascist local elites in these places shift from shift into using specifically Mexican immigrants as like these boogeymen to in order to scare people, in order to have an excuse to increase not only policing but to build the jail as big as they can, and of course to build it for ICE and to get that revenue stream. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. I feel like we don't have that much time. I'm looking at this clock, but like the whole thing is international in a way, and our focus is on the United States, but it is international for sure, and it is about and not just sort of flatten it this way, but like it is about like the control of labor in the United States and the control of labor. I mean, that sounds so anodyne because it's like the control of labor through like the dehumanization and wasting people, you know, like really. So it's so bleak to end on. And then in terms of exporting it, it's like, I don't know. There's more to think about there, and I'm not going to make claims that aren't in the book. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this is the part where I don't know what to do. Should we open to Q&A? Should I ask another question? We can have a moment of democracy. Audience, what do you want?
We're going to do
Q&A. Doing Q&A. Okay.
Yeah.
I just got a chat note saying we are doing Q&A.
Yeah.
I guess we're doing Q&A.
Hi, I'm not an expert in prison industrial complex, but I do know a little bit about that there is such thing as prison industrial complex. We were talking about jails, county jails, and you started to talk about the structure of how the Glades County set it up as, I guess, a nonprofit. Is it foreseeable that at some point they could sell that asset off to a private owner and continue? The point is, and I understand what you're saying, like it's a revenue stream. Each person they get there. And to share a little bit about myself, I just became disabled. I worked for Apple doing tech support almost 70 hours a week during COVID. I'm now disabled. I moved into a women's homeless shelter. And I'm discovering that I'm part of what I feel like is a shelter industrial complex. I represent a revenue for the shelter. I think many of these shelters are privately owned. It's a similar type of structure. Are these jails, some of the jails that you ran across, are they structured in such a way where they're not for profits, but maybe they're owned by individuals, or is that not the case? And one other question, were you just studying basically the situation with ICE sending immigrants into these prisons, or was it also just like local, people that have lived here for generations that are going to jail, and they represent some kind of revenue stream as well for that they're getting from somewhere?
Those are great questions. I'll quickly, they're all public institutions. The jails are run by county governments. So if the nonprofit thing in Glades was confusing, it's because it was meant to be by design. But really, it's the people in the county made this nonprofit structure for the purpose of like liability, to be able to access public debt through that nonprofit and to be able to say, well, it's not really the county. And in fact, it is the county. And I'm not really even sure what's going on in the Glades, but I think like the county had to take it over anyway. So it gets confusing because we're talking about public institutions and public jails in every case. But governments, and I learned this from reading Ruthie's book on California, Golden Gulag, and then I learned it through researching with Ruthie in New York State. It's like like state governments, local governments, they create these sort of shell games in order to access public debt, in order, in this case, to like limit liability, but also to get around any democratic controls. And it's so it's not like anybody is owning it, except it's still a public thing. And it's really confusing and hard to sort of see through. And like that's a lot of the work that people have to do fighting these things, is figuring out, because it's hard, and it's meant to be hard. It's by shell game, I mean, you know, when there's 3 cups in a ball and people are like doing this, and it's like, which one is the ball? And it's like that with money. And the other part, I'm sorry, the other part of your question.
The other part was, are the people that are being imprisoned,
Oh, yeah.
people besides the immigrants coming in now or they're
Right.
paroled,
Okay.
Are they creating a revenue stream?
Okay.
For people that have, been
Right.
here for generations that are jailed?
Right. They're not creating a revenue stream. That people who are like incarcerated locally by the county are generally not. But it's not like, so if a sheriff runs a jail, it's not like the sheriff is sitting on like piles of money under his pillow that come from the revenue stream. It's more like it goes into the county budget, basically. So in the county budget, like a jail is often like a major cost of any county budget. So the revenue stream that like they might get, like a county, like maybe not Glades, but some like a county in Iowa or something that like locks up their own, but because every county locks up their own, and they house for ICE, it sort of offsets the cost of running the jail for them. And it might not even do that. That's the other thing. It might not even do that. Often, like these jail expansion are happening because it's a political struggle within the county, right? And the sheriff there are interests that want to expand the jail, and they want like to expand the police at the cost of every other thing, every other capacity in the county. And this is real, and this is everywhere that this is happening. And it's really everywhere. So it's a political struggle. They're trying to expand the jail, and they will use things like, in some cases, the revenue stream will help offset the jail. In some cases, it's just what the sheriff is going to say in order to convince the county commission to build a bigger jail, if that makes sense. And then there's all sorts of other stuff that I would can go into. Like some states, the like Kentucky and Tennessee and Indiana, those states will incarcerate people on low-level charges, like Class C and D felonies, often drug charges, which is a lot of charges in a state like Kentucky. They'll incarcerate those people in the county jails, and the state will actually pay a per diem to the county. So it's like, it can get confusing because it's like the money and it's revenue, not profit. And the problem, the problem is the capacity. I mean, the problem is a lot of the things. The problem is they're killing people, they're shortening people's lives. But the other problem in a state like Kentucky is like, well, what does it matter if they're keeping people in the jail or a state prison? It's like, it matters in a lot of ways, and one of the major ways it matters is that almost every county in Kentucky has built a state prison-sized jail. And every county in Kentucky, because you have to get charged with a low-level felony for the state to give that county money, right? So if I get charged with drug possession in Kentucky, it's a felony. I go to Harlan County Jail, the state is going to pay a per diem to Harlan County. If you defelonize drug possession or decriminalize it, but let's say you defelonize drug possession and I go to jail for 30 days for a drug possession, I don't know, all of a sudden it's the county paying. So it's like it's an important point you're making. So these sorts of details, that's what I mean by they restructure the political relationship. So like right now in Kentucky, it's like you can be a really progressive county person, but if you support the defelonization of things or the decriminalization of things, you're like almost arguing to make your county insolvent. Does that make sense?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been sitting here listening since about 6:30, and not once have I heard you talk about the victims of crime. Okay, there are women who have been raped, people who have experienced robbery, murder, aggravated assault, and they want these people to be put away in jail because there are other people who do not rape or rob or con people out of a lot of money. What about their safety? You have Danny Masterson, the Scientologist, was finally put away in jail, and then you learn that he violently raped many women. Now he's in jail, thank God, and he's, regular people can live in safety. I mean, the other thing, and a comparison, you keep talking about how jail is bad, jail is bad. Okay, what is the solution? If somebody murders, several people, what's your solution then? To just turn the other cheek? I mean, it's not the police who are murdering people, it's these criminals.
Sorry. Ruthie, did you hear that? Did you?
I haven't heard this question in a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking it. Let us for a moment agree with you for the moment about people who kill people and rape people. That is a tiny, tiny fraction of all the people who are locked up in prison and jail in the United States. So whether or not ultimately I will agree with you that somehow locking up people who have killed people, my family's been the victim of murders, that somehow either brings back the dead person or prevents further murder. Rape, for example, is the violent expression of a right to rule. It's got nothing to do with sex and everything to do with domination and the expression of right. Whether it's a man raping a woman, a man raping a man, a woman raping a man or a woman. That's what rape is. So the result of those horrifying activities should make us want to end that kind of harm moving forward, not turn the other cheek and say it doesn't matter, but ask what makes people vulnerable to those kinds of harms, as well as what has led some people to harm people rather than to do something else with their lives. Now, there are tons of things that you can read and tons of organizations that exist throughout the United States who are trying to tackle these problems, to reduce harm. And while you might think the police don't kill people, the fact is that since those cops killed George Floyd, the police have been killing more people a year than ever before. That 1 in 5 homicides in the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico, is police killing indigenous people. The problem is imagining that the way we resolve organized violence is through violence. That is the problem, not the solution.
Sorry, we have a question, but we need a mic.
Yeah, I have a question. It sounds like we're getting confused about what the topic is here, because I don't think anybody's arguing that people who commit those crimes belong in jail. What we're talking about is manipulating a system to make money using people who are not strong in terms of asserting their rights. And we've got to keep a perspective here. We're not talking about don't put criminals in jail. We're talking about establishing a money-making system that takes advantage of people who don't who really are at the bottom of the barrel in terms of being able to assert their rights. Now, somebody could be thrown in jail, and if they if they have money and so forth, they can find a lawyer, and if it's unjust, get them out of jail. But we're not talking about that. So am I understanding your point?
Okay, so that's a good. We're almost out of time. I'm not trying to shut it down, but I guess I will. Ruthie, do you mind if I answer this one? It's like we are talking about that. We're also talking about, like, I'm just going to speak from. Okay, so like when COVID started in 2020, I went up because I'm not from New York City. I'm from Washington County, New York, which is north of here about 4 hours, rural county. I went up there, right? And I was scared. I didn't want to get COVID and die. I have underlying health issues. So I went there. This is a county where the hospital, because Ruthie was talking about hospitals, in which like most of my aunts and uncles and stuff were born, sits at the top of a hill and was closed. It's shut down. It's abandoned. There are no hospital beds in the county. And they shut down that hospital in 2003. And 2003 is the same year that they at least tripled the size of the jail. They built a new jail in a different part of the county and now have the capacity to lock up or detain hundreds of people. They also have 2 prisons in Washington County. So like, I forget what it was. It's like they have the ability to lock up like thousands of people, let's say, and there's not a hospital bed to be found. And this is also an area that where the water is poisoned, which I grew up in. It has a very high rate of kidney cancer, for example. So people are sick. People die of preventable diseases because of, are they crimes, we'll call them, like industrial waste poisoning the water? Whatever. But the point is, I think this is not, I'm sorry, I'm getting this tone in my voice again. It's all your fault, guys, but it's not. I mean, the point is, it's like, this book is about that, you know, and I would hope. And it's about the sort of the expansion of this jail, and the jail, and we mean police, because jail is an infrastructure of policing. So you're right to tie it to police. They're run by sheriff's office. It's an expansion of that at the expense of any other capacity that the state or the county might have in this case. And I mean that literally, right? Like, because a county has a certain debt capacity, and it's being tied up to build the infrastructure to harm people, actually, because jail harms people. Even a night in jail harms people. People die in jail. The police do kill people. But yes, and also, and because jail is not a prison, so we're talking about like the places where people are going in for whatever, shoplifting, DWIs, this stuff, and where people are going on their way to prison. But like, I'm getting lost in the weeds again. We're talking about that expansion. So it's like the capacity of counties all over the country, what they're able to do. And the reason I bring the COVID stuff up is because it was terrifying, actually, because it's like to be in a place and to know that like this county for the past 20 years almost has only invested in its ability to lock me up, to pull me over, that sort of thing. There's no hospital bed where I can go to. And yeah, and the water is poison, which is another issue. But so I think that's what it's about. But it's also about what you're saying. And the making money thing, that gets confusing because it's like, again, it's like not like the sheriffs are making money. The sheriffs or the people expanding jails are actually just transforming what the place is more than anybody's getting rich off it. Does that make sense? And I wish we had more time and you had the patience to listen to me tell more stories about that,
So we are all out of time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.